All right, boys and girls. So this is my very first video lesson for you. Remember, I told you yesterday I wanted to try this out and experiment with putting up some lesson videos on YouTube as much as you all love YouTube. So we're going to start off today with some Greek mythology and allusions. And I'm going to be going through this slideshow, and you have some notes in front of you, some fill in the blank notes. I have highlighted the most important information on each slide. And remember, at any time, if you want to pause and go back and listen to something again, or if I'm moving too fast, you can do that. You have the power of pause. So let's get started. As you can see, the title of our slide here is Greek Mythology and Allusions. And I'm not talking about illusions, like a magician would create illusions for his audience. I'm talking about allusions. You see this allusions here. And we've already kind of mentioned allusions. Last week we had a center that dealt with allusions a little bit, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into those this week and the next. So here we go. Starting with Greek mythology, we've already talked about what Greek mythology is. Greek mythology is the body of stories about the ancient Greeks. Remember, the people who lived in the country of Greece a long, 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 long time ago, thousands of years ago. And they believed in these gods and goddesses. And these people, or these, again, they're not people, they're just these spiritual beings, were their heroes. And these were the gods and goddesses who determined how their world was run, what happened with the weather, what happened in war, what happened with beauty. So these were the people that they looked to. So we're going to start off with just the main Greek gods and goddesses. There were hundreds of Greek gods and goddesses that the Greek people believed in, but we're going to focus on just a few very important and kind of main gods and goddesses, starting with Zeus. We kind of already talked about him. He is the kind of the ruler of all gods and goddesses. He has two brothers, Hades and Poseidon. And Zeus is known for carrying a lightning bolt. That is kind of his symbol. So he is the king of the gods, the ruler of Mount Olympus, and the god of sky and thunder. And Mount Olympus, that word or those words there together, Mount Olympus is a place that the Greeks believed that the gods and goddesses lived. This is where they kind of ruled over the mortal world. And mortals, we've talked about, are just the humans. The gods and goddesses, as the Greeks believed, were immortal or non-living. They weren't human beings, and they had special powers. Moving on to Hera, she was the goddess of marriage. The Greeks believed her to be the goddess of marriage, and she took many forms, including that of a bird. So sometimes the Greeks believed in the stories and myths that were passed down, they believed that she would sometimes come down as a bird. Pretty interesting. Next, we have Apollo. Apollo was the god of prophecy, music, and healing. And it was said that when someone died suddenly, he was the one who struck them with one of his arrows. And of course, all myths, but this is just something that became a part of Greek culture, a part of their lives. They believed this stuff. So if someone were to just die out of nowhere, they would think that it came from Apollo. Here's Hermes. He was the messenger of the gods and guide of dead souls to the underworld, and he was known for his helpfulness to mankind. So he communicated between the gods and the mortals, the people who believed in these gods and goddesses. And he was said to have wings on his feet that helped him fly. Here's Athena. Athena was the goddess of crafts and domestic arts, also those of war, and her symbol was the owl. So those of you who like owls, Athena is the goddess for you. And she is also known as the goddess of wisdom. Here's Poseidon. As you can see in this picture here, he's got his trident symbol, and he's also causing a storm to occur in the middle of the ocean. So he was the god of the sea, earthquakes, and horses, all three of those. And although he was officially one of the supreme gods of Mount Olympus, he spent most of his time in his watery domain. Like I said, he is brother to Zeus and Hades. And these three brothers actually divided up the creation. So this is what the Greeks believed. They believed that Zeus was ruler of sky, Hades, ruler of the underworld, and Poseidon, ruler of all water. That includes fresh and salt water. And so that's where he liked to stay, was near the water. That was his domain. Here's Demeter. Demeter was goddess of agriculture. So I gave the example yesterday about if you were a farmer and you really wanted to have a good season for your crops, you were going to look to the god or goddess of agriculture. So Demeter would have been the goddess that farmers and those involved with agriculture would have looked to help them have good crops. Here's Aphrodite. We read a little bit about her in our passage yesterday. She was the goddess of love and beauty. So anyone who was seeking love or seeking a makeover of sorts, they would look to Aphrodite. Here we have Ares. Notice his symbols. He's got a shield, a helmet, and a spear. He was the god of war, and he was considered handsome and cruel. He is often shown in pictures carrying a blood-stained spear, and his throne was said to be covered in human skin on Mount Olympus, so kind of gross. Now we're going to go into allusions. I just have a couple of slides here. And we've talked about allusions, like I said, a little bit already, but we're just going to define what an allusion is, give some examples of allusions, and I really want you all to be on the lookout for allusions when we start talking about Greek mythology. I want you to pick out when I show you commercials and just different examples of where we might find allusions in our everyday life. I really want you to pay attention to where those might have come from in the Greek myths we'll be studying for the next couple of weeks. So an allusion is when a person or an author makes an indirect reference in speech, text, or song to something in literature or history. That's a bunch of words for taking something from Greek mythology or sometimes the Bible or a famous work of literature, a famous book that's been around for a long time. And it's so famous that even if you haven't read it, it's almost like everyone, for example, The Wizard of Oz, even if you haven't read the book, The Wizard of Oz, or seen the movie, it's so famous that it can easily be alluded to because people just know about Dorothy and her little dog Toto and her Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion, and her red slippers, all of that stuff. They just know because it's so famous. And so that's what an allusion is. It's making a reference to something that is so well known that people get the reference when you use that terminology. So for example, this is a biblical allusion. If I were to say your backyard is a Garden of Eden, that is a biblical allusion pointing back to a story in the Bible. Here, you're a regular Einstein. Einstein is a historical figure. He's very famous, known for his intelligence. So if I say you're a regular Einstein, I'm just saying that you're really smart. If we say don't be a Grinch, that's referencing How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which we all know and love. And that doesn't mean that you are actually the Grinch. It just means don't be a hater on Christmas. Don't be like that. Don't be grumpy. Here we have potato chips are my diet's Achilles heel. Now, this is one that points back to Greek mythology, and there's a picture that kind of references it here.